She was one of the most powerful pharaohs in Egyptian history, a builder of architectural marvels who brought an age of incredible peace and wealth. She ruled for over 20 years not as a queen, but as a king. And yet, after her death, a campaign began to wipe her from history. Her statues were smashed, her name scraped from temple walls, and her face was chiseled out of existence. This is the story of Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh history tried to erase, and the big question is why. Imagine you're walking through the grand temples of ancient Egypt, a civilization that built itself on the idea of eternity. You see the towering figures of pharaohs, carved into stone, their names circled by the sacred cartouche, a promise of everlasting power. But then, you notice something odd. A void, an outline where a figure and a name used to be. You see it again and again, on temple walls, on massive obelisks, in the shattered pieces of once majestic statues. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a deliberate, methodical erasure. Someone with enormous power organized a nationwide effort to delete a ruler from the pages of history. This wasn't just about forgetting someone. This was an act of damnation, an attempt to deny their soul a place in the afterlife. The empty spaces whisper of a story so powerful, so disruptive, that someone felt it had to be silenced. The target of this incredible effort wasn't a foreign enemy or a hated tyrant. She was one of Egypt's own, a pharaoh of the legendary 18th dynasty, a golden age of power. Her name was Hatshepsut. For over 2 decades, she held the throne of the most powerful nation on earth, and by all accounts, her reign was a massive success. So why the desecration? Why would her successors go to so much trouble to pretend she never existed? To answer that, we have to understand the world she was born into, a world of gods and men, where the order of the universe was a fragile thing, and the role of the pharaoh was absolute. To understand just how audacious Hatshepsut's rise was, we have to go back to the Egypt of the New Kingdom. Around 1500 BCE, this was a civilization built on tradition and divine order. The single most important value, the core of their entire worldview, was a concept called Mat. Mat was more than a word. It was truth, justice, balance, and the fundamental order of the cosmos. It was the force that made the sun rise, the Nile flood its banks and feed the land, and the stars move predictably across the sky. The opposite of Mat was Isfit, chaos, injustice, and lies. And there was one person on earth whose job it was to maintain Mat and fight back Isfit, the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was a living god, the earthly form of Horus, son of the creator god Ra. He was the sacred link between mortals and the divine. Through rituals and just rule, he kept the gods happy, maintained cosmic balance, and ensured Egypt's prosperity. Now, for thousands of years, the office of pharaoh was fundamentally male. Kingship was a man's job. There had been a few rare female rulers or powerful regents, like Sobin-Pharaoh centuries earlier, but they were exceptions to a deeply ingrained rule. The pharaoh was the warrior, the protector, the symbolic father of his people. His masculinity was central to his power. This was the rigid, patriarchal world Hatshepsut was born into. Now, to be clear, women in ancient Egypt had rights almost unheard of in the ancient world. They could own property, run businesses, and even file for divorce. But the throne? The divine office of Pharaoh? That was a line a woman wasn't supposed to cross. To do so would challenge not just tradition, but the divine order of the universe. It was an act that risked upsetting Mat and throwing the world into chaos. And yet, one woman would not only dare it, she would succeed beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Hatshepsut's story starts not with ambition, but with her bloodline. She was born at the very center of power, the daughter of the great Pharaoh Thutmose I and his principal wife, the great royal wife Ahmose. This made her royalty of the highest, purest order. From her first days, She was surrounded by the ceremony and politics of the royal court. As was common practice, Hatshepsut was married to her half-brother Thutmose II to consolidate power and keep the royal bloodline pure. He was the son of their father and a lesser wife, which actually made Hatshepsut his superior in terms of divine ancestry. When Thutmose I died, Thutmose II took the throne, and Hatshepsut became the great royal wife, the most powerful traditional role for a woman. But she was more than a consort. Hatshepsut also held the prestigious and powerful religious title, God's wife of Amun. The god Amun-Ra was the king of the gods, the most important deity in the Egyptian pantheon. As his divine wife, Hatshepsut was his chief priestess with incredible wealth, political sway, and a direct line to the state's most powerful religious body. She was a major political and religious player in the capital city of Thebes long before she ever became pharaoh. She was learning, watching, and building the authority she would one day need to do the unthinkable. The straightforward path of Hatshepsut's life was cut short by the death of her husband. Thutmose II had a short and unremarkable reign. He died young, leaving behind a kingdom and a succession problem. Hatshepsut had given him a daughter, Nefer, but no son. The heir to the throne was a young boy, just a toddler, also named Thutmose. This was Thutmose III, the son of the late pharaoh and a secondary wife. By law, the child king Thutmose III was the rightful pharaoh, but a toddler couldn't run an empire. Tradition dictated that the role of regent, the power behind the throne, fell to the dowager queen, the boy's stepmother, Hatshepsut. This was a normal, accepted role for a powerful royal woman. For the first few years of her stepson's reign, Hatshepsut played the part perfectly. In carvings from this time, she's shown as the dutiful regent, standing behind the small figure of Thutmose III, a protective presence, but always in the number 2 spot. She was ruling for him, not as him. All official documents named Thutmose III as the king. She was simply the caretaker, holding his throne until he came of age. She governed well, handling state affairs and keeping the kingdom stable. She was respected, powerful, and operating completely within the rules. No one could have seen the incredible leap she was about to make. To the outside world, she was just holding a place. But in Hatshepsut's mind, a much bigger plan was forming. The regency wasn't a ceiling. It was a launch pad. Around the 7th year of her regency, something unbelievable happened. Hatshepsut made a move that was basically without precedent in 3,000 years of Egyptian history. She was done being the power behind the throne. She decided to become the power on the throne. She declared herself pharaoh. This wasn't a violent takeover. There's no evidence of a struggle. Thutmose III wasn't overthrown. In a brilliant political move, Hatshepsut had herself crowned as his senior co-ruler. He was still a pharaoh in name, but she was now the dominant king. From that moment, the official records shift. Her name starts appearing in the royal cartouche, and she adopted the full 5-part title of a pharaoh. The official dating of monuments was even reset to her year 1, though some monuments continued to reference Thutmose III's regnal years, reflecting the unique complexity of their co-rule. It was an act of pure ambition that challenged the very fabric of their society. It was a disruption of Mot. How could a woman become the living Horus, the male protector of Egypt? How could she possibly justify it? Hatshepsut knew she couldn't rely on political games alone. The pharaoh's power came from the gods. If she was going to be accepted as king, she couldn't just take power. She had to rewrite the divine rules. She needed a story so powerful it would sound like it came from the gods themselves. And so, she launched one of the most masterful propaganda campaigns in ancient history. To be a pharaoh was to be chosen by the gods. Hatshepsut, knowing her gender was her biggest weakness, set out to prove her rule wasn't ambition, but divine will. Her main tool was the story she carved into the walls of her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. Here, she laid out her case in a series of reliefs known as the Divine Birth. The story was revolutionary. It claimed the king of the gods, Amun-Ra, wanted to create a perfect ruler for Egypt. He came to the queen, Hatshepsut's mother, disguised as her husband, the Pharaoh Thutmose I. The reliefs show the god and the queen together, conceiving a child. Amun then declared that this daughter was destined for greatness, proclaiming, "She shall exercise the excellent kingship in this whole land." It was a masterstroke. Hatshepsut wasn't just the daughter of a pharaoh anymore. She was the biological daughter of the king of the gods. Who could argue with that? But she didn't stop there. She won the support of the powerful priesthood of Amun, the institution she once led. She claimed the oracle of Amun had officially proclaimed her the ruler, a divine command announced at a public festival. To seal the deal, she created a retroactive coronation story. Reliefs show her own revered father, Thutmose I, presenting a young Hatshepsut to the court and declaring her his heir. Whether it really happened was irrelevant. She carved it in stone, so it became historical fact. Finally, she tackled the image problem. The pharaoh was visually male, so Hatshepsut adopted the uniform. In statues and reliefs, she's shown with all the symbols of male kingship: the kilt, the headdress, and even the ceremonial false beard. It's important to understand this wasn't about denying her gender. The texts next to these images often use female pronouns. This was about visual language. The job of Pharaoh had a uniform, and she put it on, signaling that she wasn't a queen acting like a king. She was the king. If you're finding this hidden history fascinating, and the story of this incredible woman's rise to power compelling, take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We have so much more to uncover, and you won't want to miss our next dive into the forgotten corners of the past. Having secured her throne, Hatshepsut now had to prove she deserved it. She had to show that her rule brought stability and prosperity that she was upholding met. And she delivered, kicking off one of the most peaceful and prosperous periods in the new kingdom. Unlike the warrior pharaohs before and after her, Hatshepsut's reign wasn't about military conquest. While there is evidence of some minor military campaigns to secure the borders in Nubia and Canaan, her focus was overwhelmingly on trade and building, not expansion. Her goal was to make Egypt rich, not just bigger. The heart of her economic policy was expanding trade. Her crowning achievement, an expedition so important she had it carved in detail on her temple walls, was the journey to the fabled land of Punt. For centuries, Punt, or God's land, was a semi-mythical place, a source of luxuries that Egyptians got through middlemen. Its exact location is still debated, but it was likely on the coast of the Horn of Africa. In her 9th year as pharaoh, Hatshepsut sent a massive naval expedition of 5 large ships down the Red Sea to trade directly with Punt's people. The temple reliefs show the whole story: the Egyptian ships arriving, the cone-shaped houses of Punt, their chief and his wife, and most importantly, the incredible bounty the Egyptians brought back: gold, ebony, ivory, exotic animals, and most precious of all, frankincense and myrrh. Myrrh was crucial for temple incense, but Hatshepsut didn't just bring back the resin. She brought back 31 live myrrh trees, their roots in baskets, and had them successfully planted at her temple in Egypt, the first recorded attempt to transplant foreign trees. The expedition was a huge success. It pumped incredible wealth into the Egyptian economy, showed off the nation's power, and was a public relations masterpiece for its female pharaoh. It proved that a woman's reign could bring not just stability, but unprecedented wealth. If the Punt expedition was the jewel of her economic policy, her building program was the bedrock of her legacy. Hatshepsut was one of the most prolific builders in Egyptian history, commissioning hundreds of projects across the kingdom. These weren't just vanity projects. They were political statements, a way to employ thousands of people, and a method of carving her power into the very landscape of Egypt. Her masterpiece is the stunning mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri, which she called Jisr Jisiru, or Holy of Holies. It's a series of 3 grand colonnaded terraces rising from the desert floor against a dramatic cliff face. The design is elegant and breathtakingly modern. On its walls, she carved the story of her divine birth and the voyage to Punt, ensuring any visitor would understand her legitimacy and success. But she didn't stop there. At Karnak, the most sacred temple complex in Egypt, she launched a massive building program. Her most stunning additions were 2 colossal obelisks, each carved from a single block of red granite. They stood nearly 100 feet tall and weighed about 350 tons each. The engineering required to quarry them, float them down the Nile, and raise them is incredible even today. One still stands at Karnak, a silent testament to her power. She also built the beautiful red chapel at Karnak, later dismantled, but since painstakingly reconstructed by archaeologists. Her projects were everywhere. She restored old temples and built new shrines. This massive building program was a national enterprise, providing work for thousands and constantly reminding the people of the power and presence of their pharaoh. Through stone and sheer will, Hatshepsut was building a legacy she believed would last forever. For 22 years, Hatshepsut ruled over a peaceful, prosperous Egypt. She had proven a woman could preside over a golden age. All the while, her stepson, Thutmose III, was growing from a sideline boy into a man. He wasn't locked away. Hatshepsut gave him command of Egypt's armies, and he developed into a brilliant military leader, leading campaigns on behalf of the crown. The end of Hatshepsut's reign is quiet. There's no evidence of a dramatic overthrow or a power struggle. Around 1458 BCE, Hatshepsut died, probably in her late 40s or early 50s. Analysis of her mummy, which was identified in 2007, suggests she may have had bone cancer and diabetes. Upon her death, power passed seamlessly to her co-ruler and successor, the now adult Thutmose III. For the first 2 decades of his solo reign, he seemed to respect her memory. Her monuments remained untouched. He set out on his own path, becoming one of Egypt's greatest military pharaohs, the Napoleon of Egypt, expanding the empire to its greatest ever size. For a time, it looked like Hatshepsut's gamble had paid off. She had ruled successfully, power had transferred peacefully, and her legacy seemed secure. The peace that marked the end of her reign is what makes what happened next so shocking. The silence was broken, the chisels came out, and the erasure began. Now we return to the mystery we started with, but with the full weight of her success in mind. Decades after Hatshepsut's peaceful death, long after Thutmose III had established himself as a legendary pharaoh, a state-sponsored campaign to destroy her memory was launched. This was meticulous, widespread, and systematic. The timing is the key. The destruction didn't start right after she died. It began late in Thutmose III's reign, maybe 20 years after he took sole power. By then, he was an old man himself, thinking about his own death and the future of his dynasty. The methods were brutally precise. At Karnak, walls were built to hide her massive obelisks. Throughout Egypt, her image was painstakingly chiseled away from temple reliefs. Sometimes her figure was recarved to look like a man her father, her husband, or Thutmose III himself. Her cartouches, the sacred ovals with her royal name, were scratched out and replaced. At her magnificent temple, hundreds of her statues were dragged out, smashed into thousands of pieces, and dumped in a pit. The goal was clear: to remove Hatshepsut from the official list of kings. They wanted to rewrite history, so it looked like Thutmose III had succeeded his father directly, as if the 22-year reign of the most powerful woman in their history had simply never happened. They were trying to annihilate her very existence. For centuries, the easy answer seemed to be revenge. The evil stepmother theory suggests Thutmose III spent decades seething with resentment for the aunt who stole his throne, finally unleashing his bitterness. It's a great story, but the evidence doesn't quite fit. If he hated her so much, why wait 20 years to act? The personal revenge theory is probably too simple. Most scholars now believe the real answer is more complex and, in a way, more chilling. It wasn't about personal hatred. It was about political ideology. When the erasure began, Thutmose III was an old man, concerned with ensuring a smooth succession for his own son, Amenhotep II. And that's where Hatshepsut was a problem. Her reign, as successful as it was, had created a dangerous precedent. She had shown that a powerful royal woman could claim the throne. What was to stop another queen in the future from challenging the rightful male heir and plunging Egypt into civil war? Hatshepsut's existence as a king threatened the traditional patriarchal line of succession. To protect his own lineage, Thutmose III, or perhaps even his son, trying to secure his own power, had to erase that precedent. They needed to fix the timeline. This was about restoring the cosmic order. A woman king, no matter how successful, was an ideological disruption. The erasure was a conservative backlash, an attempt to restore sacred tradition and make sure the office of Pharaoh was an unbroken line of fathers and sons. They weren't just erasing a woman. They were erasing the idea that a woman could be king. In a strange way, it was a testament to how successful, and therefore how threatening, her reign had been. You don't forget an insignificant ruler. You have to actively erase a great one. The great irony is that this massive campaign of destruction ultimately failed. In fact, the very attempt to erase Hatshepsut is what led to her rediscovery. The ancient Egyptians were thorough, but not perfect. In hard-to-reach places, her name and image survived. At her temple, the pit where her shattered statues were dumped became a time capsule for archaeologists. When they began excavating in the 19th and 20th centuries, they found these tantalizing clues. They found the Hatshepsut-shaped holes in the king lists and knew a story was missing. The key that unlocked the mystery was the decipherment of hieroglyphs. For the first time in millennia, scholars could read the texts on her temple walls, piecing together her incredible story in her own words. They could match the defaced images with the surviving ones and slowly, painstakingly, resurrect the queen who was meant to be forgotten. The story climaxed in 2007. In 1903, archaeologist Howard Carter had found a small tomb, Kivi 60, with 2 female mummies. One was Hatshepsut's wet nurse. The other was anonymous and left behind. A century later, a team led by Dr. Zahi Hawass revisited the mummy. Using CT scans, they made an incredible discovery. A broken tooth found in a wooden box bearing Hatshepsut's name was a perfect match for a missing molar in the mummy's jaw. While the identification is widely accepted, a few experts remain cautious pending further conclusive evidence. Still, through this amazing piece of forensic work, the great female pharaoh was finally brought back into the light, not just as a name, but as a person. Hatshepsut's story is an epic saga of ambition, power, and legacy. She was a woman who defied every rule of her time to rule the most powerful civilization on earth. She wasn't a placeholder queen. She was a true pharaoh who led an era of peace, wealth, and breathtaking artistic achievement. Her reign was so successful, so revolutionary, that her successors felt they had no choice but to try to wipe her from time itself. The attempt to erase her is the ultimate proof of her importance. You don't take a hammer and chisel to the legacy of a minor figure. You do it to a giant whose shadow looms too large. But history has a long memory. The stones remembered what people tried to forget. Through the patient work of scholars and the wonders of science, her story has been reassembled. The attempt to erase her failed. Hatshepsut's legacy endured, hidden in the sand, waiting. Today, she is recognized for what she was. Not just the woman who would be king, but one of the most formidable and brilliant rulers in the 3,000-year history of ancient Egypt. Her story is a powerful reminder that even when victors write the history, the truth has a way of rising again. If you want to learn more about the incredible rulers of ancient Egypt, check out our playlist here. And let us know in the comments which hidden historical figure we should uncover next. Thanks for watching.